The day I was supposed to marry Thalia Vance at Thornfield Chapel, she left me at the altar for Professor Orion Beckett, the man who had nearly destroyed my academic career 3 years earlier.
Ow.
Everyone said Thalia despised Beckett with every fiber of her being and loved me unconditionally. They were wrong on both counts. It was only because I had once sacrificed my doctoral thesis to expose Beckett's research plagiarism that I ended up losing my university position and dreams of becoming a professor. During the 2 years I spent rebuilding my life outside academia, Thalia often said, "What a foolish man. You threw away your future for nothing. Beckett wasn't worth destroying your career over." Yet despite her complaints, she had been secretly taking his advanced seminars and study sessions. Even on our wedding day, she abandoned me in front of 200 guests, saying, "I'm sorry, Aiden, but Orion needs me. His tenure review is today, and I'm the only one who can help him present his defense." The whole university community watched as they mocked me, but I had other plans. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Aiden Sinclair, and 3 years ago, I was the most promising doctoral candidate at Westmont University's prestigious institute for advanced learning. My dissertation on revolutionary educational technology and artificial intelligence integration was groundbreaking work that could have transformed how universities approach digital learning. I'd spent 4 years of my life, countless sleepless nights, and every ounce of my intellectual energy developing theories that were years ahead of their time. The Research Institute at Westmont was housed in the historic Blackstone Hall, a Gothic revival building that had been the crown jewel of the campus since 1887. Walking through those hallowed halls, surrounded by portraits of Nobel laureates and distinguished scholars, I felt like I belonged to something greater than myself. My advisor, Dr. Helena Morrison, was one of the most respected figures in educational psychology, and she had taken me under her wing since my first year. "Aiden," she would often say, "your work has the potential to revolutionize how we think about learning itself. You're not just writing a dissertation, you're crafting the future of education." Those words meant everything to me. I came from a working-class family in the industrial town of Millbrook, where my father worked double shifts at the steel plant and my mother cleaned offices to pay for my education. Being at Westmont wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about honoring their sacrifices and proving that someone from my background could contribute to the world of high academia. That's where Professor Orion Beckett entered my story. Beckett was the golden boy of the education department, a man in his early 40s who had somehow fast-tracked his way to tenure through what seemed like an endless stream of published papers. He was handsome in that refined, intellectual way that made graduate students swoon, salt and pepper hair, perfectly tailored tweed jackets, and the kind of confident smile that suggested he knew secrets the rest of us didn't. I first noticed something was wrong during a departmental conference. In my final year, Beckett was presenting research on adaptive learning algorithms that seemed remarkably similar to work I had discussed in my preliminary defense 6 months earlier. The terminology, the framework, even some of the specific examples, it was as if he had taken my ideas and polished them for his own presentation. When I approached Dr. Morrison about my concerns, she initially dismissed them. "Academic ideas often evolve in parallel, Aiden. Similarity doesn't necessarily mean plagiarism." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I started investigating, comparing timestamps on shared departmental files, analyzing citation patterns. In discovering a disturbing trend, Beckett had been systematically incorporating elements from graduate student research into his own work for years. He was careful about it, never taking everything from one source, always changing enough to maintain plausible deniability. But the pattern was unmistakable. Once you knew what to look for, the discovery that broke everything was finding my own. Preliminary research notes in Beckett's office computer. I had been helping Dr. Morrison with some administrative tasks that required accessing the shared departmental server. And there they were, my private files, downloaded and modified, with my name stripped away and Beckett's analysis inserted. Throughout, that's when I met Thalia Vance. She was a doctoral candidate in comparative literature. working on her dissertation about power dynamics in 19th century academic institutions. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. She was brilliant, passionate, incredibly beautiful, the kind of woman who could quote Foucault while discussing the latest Netflix series, who made intellectual conversations feel like intimate conversations. We met in the university library during one of my investigation marathons. I was surrounded by stacks of papers, trying to document the extent of Beckett's plagiarism, when she approached my table. "You look like someone trying to solve the mysteries of the universe," she said with a smile that made my heart skip. "Something like that," I replied, and before I knew it, we were talking until the library closed. Thalia became my anchor during the darkest period of my academic life. When I finally gathered enough evidence to file formal plagiarism charges against Beckett, she was the one who encouraged me to follow through, even though we both knew it would be academic suicide. "Integrity matters more than career advancement," she said, holding my hands across the table at our favorite coffee shop, Meridian Caf, near the campus. "You can't let him destroy other students' futures the way he's trying to destroy yours." The investigation that followed was a nightmare that lasted 8 months. Beckett had allies throughout the administration, people who owed their positions to his connections and influence. My advisor, Dr. Morrison, was placed in an impossible position, supporting me in challenging the department's golden boy and potentially losing her own standing. The university's response was predictably political. They conducted a thorough investigation that somehow concluded there was insufficient evidence of intentional plagiarism, while acknowledging concerning similarities that warranted additional oversight of Professor Beckett's future research. In other words, they gave him a slap on the wrist and buried the story. Meanwhile, the funding was temporarily suspended pending review. My dissertation defense was postponed indefinitely, and I found myself effectively blacklisted from the academic community I had devoted my life to joining. Dr. Morrison, despite her personal support, was forced to distance herself professionally to protect her own career and her other students. During those dark months, Thalia was my lifeline. She would bring me coffee during my long nights of job hunting, help me practice interview skills for positions I was overqualified for. Most importantly, remind me that my worth wasn't determined by the university's political games. "You're brilliant, Aiden," she would tell me. "You exposed corruption when everyone else was too afraid to speak up. That takes courage that most people in academia will never have." When I proposed to her 18 months later outside the very library where we first met, she said yes without hesitation. By then, I had found work with Pinnacle Educational Consulting, a firm that helped universities implement new technologies and improve their academic programs. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now advising institutions from the outside. Having been forced out of the one I had devoted my life to, we planned our wedding for June 15th at Thornfield Chapel, beautiful stone church that sat on the hill overlooking Westmont's campus. It seemed fitting somehow, getting married in view of the place that had both broken my heart and brought me the love of my life. "After we're married," Thalia said as we finalized the details, "we'll build something better together. Maybe we'll start our own research institute someday, one where integrity actually matters." I believed her completely. I believed in us, in our shared values, and in the future we had planned together. I had no idea that during the final months of our engagement, while I was working 60-hour weeks to build my consulting practice and save money for our future, Thalia had been quietly attending Beckett's evening seminars on advanced pedagogical theory. I had no idea that the man who had destroyed my academic dreams had been slowly, methodically, working his way into her mind and eventually her heart, using the same charm and manipulation that had gotten him tenure in the first place. All I knew was that on June 15th, I was going to marry the woman I loved, surrounded by everyone who mattered to us, and finally close the chapter on the worst period of my life. I was completely, devastatingly wrong. June 15th dawned bright and perfect, kind of early summer day that seemed designed for weddings. I stood in the groom's preparation room at Thornfield Chapel, adjusting my tie for the 100th time while my best man, David Sterling, tried to calm my pre-wedding nerves. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad instead of marry the woman of your dreams," David said, straightening my boutonniere. David had been my roommate during graduate school and had witnessed both my relationship with Thalia and the destruction Beckett had caused in my life. I just can't believe this day is finally here, I admitted, looking at myself in the mirror. After everything we've been through, chapel was filling up with guests, my family from Millbrook, Thalia's colleagues from the literature department, friends from our graduate school days, and even some faculty members from Westmont who had supported me during the plagiarism scandal. Dr. Morrison was there, smiling warmly and giving me an encouraging nod when our eyes met. What I didn't know was that among the guests, sitting inconspicuously in the back row, was Professor Orion Beckett himself. Later, I would learn that Thalia had invited him, claiming it was important to show him that we had moved past the unpleasantness of the past. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The ceremony began beautifully. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon as Thalia's bridesmaids walked down the aisle, each carrying bouquets of white roses and baby's breath. Then the music changed to Wagner's bridal chorus, and every head turned to watch Thalia make her entrance. She looked absolutely stunning. Her dress was a vintage-inspired creation of ivory silk and Belgian lace that had belonged to her grandmother. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, with small white flowers woven throughout, and her smile was radiant as she walked toward me on her father's arm. But as she got closer, I noticed something in her expression that made my stomach clench, with worry. There was a distance in her eyes, a distraction that seemed completely out of place on what should have been the happiest day of our lives. When her father placed her hand in mine and we turned to face Reverend Patterson, I whispered, "Are you okay? You seem nervous." "I'm fine," she whispered back, but her hand was trembling slightly. "Just wedding jitters." The ceremony proceeded according to plan. We exchanged the vows we had written together, speaking about partnership, integrity, and building a life based on shared values and mutual respect. When Thalia spoke about choosing each other every day, especially when challenges arise, her voice caught slightly. I assumed it was emotion. Then came the moment that destroyed everything. Reverend Patterson had just asked if there were any objections to our union when Thalia's phone. She had inexplicably insisted on keeping with her despite my protests. Buzzed loudly in the chapel's silence. The sound echoed through the stone walls like a gunshot. 200 heads turned to stare as Thalia fumbled with her bouquet to check the message. Her face went completely white as she read it. "Thalia?" I whispered urgently. "What's happening?" She looked at the phone again, then up at me with something approaching panic in her eyes. The entire congregation was watching us now, the silence becoming more uncomfortable with each passing second. She started, then stopped, looking at the message once more. "Aiden, I'm so sorry, but I have to go." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean you have to go? We're in the middle of our wedding ceremony." "It's Professor Beckett," she said, and hearing that name on our wedding day felt like being stabbed. "Orion. His tenure review committee moved their final meeting to today. They're trying to ambush him with new accusations, and he needs someone who understands his research methodology to help him prepare his defense." I stared at her in complete disbelief. The murmuring from the congregation was getting louder, and I could see people pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a spectacular disaster. "Thalia, this is our wedding day. Our wedding. Right now. I know, and I'm devastated, but you don't understand how serious this is," she said, and the way she said "you don't understand" cut deeper than any knife could have. If he loses tenure because of these new allegations, his entire career will be ruined. Everything he's worked for will be destroyed. Like he destroyed my career? The words came out harsher than I intended, loud enough for the first few rows to hear clearly. Her face flushed red. That was different, and you know it. The investigation cleared him of intentional wrongdoing. The investigation was a cover-up, and you know it. I could feel my voice rising, but I couldn't stop myself. "Thalia, you're talking about abandoning our wedding to help the man who stole my research and destroyed my academic future? He didn't steal anything." The words exploded out of her with a passion that made my blood run cold. This wasn't the dispassionate defense of an innocent colleague. This was emotional, personal, invested. The similarities in your research were coincidental, and the timing she stopped herself, but it was too late. The damage was done. How do you know about the timing? I asked quietly, but my voice carried clearly through the chapel's acoustics. How do you know details about his research methodology? When did you become such an expert on Orion Beckett's work? The question hung in the air like a poison cloud. Thalia's face went through a series of expressions: panic, guilt, defiance, and finally something that looked almost like relief. Been attending his seminars? She said quietly. For the past 6 months? He's brilliant. Aiden, and his work on cognitive learning patterns is revolutionary. Someone needed to understand it well enough to help him defend it. Someone. I repeated. Or you specifically. David stepped forward from behind me. Thalia, what the hell is going on? But she wasn't looking at David or at me or at the 200 people staring at us in shocked silence. She was looking at her phone again, where another message had apparently arrived. He's waiting for me, she said, and there was something in her tone, a tenderness, an intimacy that made everything suddenly horribly clear. You're in love with him? The words came out as a statement, not a question. No, she said quickly. I'm not. It's not like that. He just ... He needs me right now. His career, his reputation, everything is on the line because of these accusations, and I'm the only one who can help him. The accusations that were true, I said. The accusations I proved were true. You proved nothing, she snapped, and now her mask was completely off. You were a jealous graduate student who couldn't accept that someone else was more successful than you were. The chapel was dead silent, except for the sound of phones recording and people whispering. I could see my parents in the third row. My mother with tears streaming down her face, my father looking like he wanted to commit murder. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out? I repeated, louder this time. Go to him. Go to your Professor Beckett. But don't you dare pretend this is about helping a colleague. Don't you dare stand there in your wedding dress and lie to me in front of everyone we know. Thalia's composure finally cracked completely. Aiden, please. I know how this looks, but I love you. I'm going to come back. We can still get married after I help him through this crisis. No, I said, and my voice was steady now. Calm with the kind of clarity that comes from having your world completely destroyed. We can't. Because you just chose him over me on our wedding day, in front of everyone who matters to us, and that's not something you come back from. She stood there for a moment, clutching her bouquet, looking like she wanted to say something else. Then her phone buzzed again, and whatever spell had been holding her broke completely. I'm sorry, she whispered, and then she turned and ran. Down the aisle, her white dress trailing behind her like a flag of surrender. The silence that followed was deafening. 200 people sat frozen, staring at me as I stood alone at the altar. Abandoned by the woman I thought I knew, humiliated in the most public way possible. But as I watched Thalia disappear through the chapel doors, probably rushing to comfort the man who had destroyed my academic career, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't broken. I was angry, and I was about to do something about it. The silence in Thornfield. Chapel stretched on for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. 200 people stared at me, some with pity, some with shock, some clearly, trying to decide whether to laugh or cry at the spectacle they had just witnessed. I stood there at the altar in my perfectly tailored tuxedo, abandoned by my bride, humiliated in front of everyone I knew, and felt something I hadn't expected. Clarity. Well, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. That was certainly illuminating. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the congregation. Reverend Patterson, who had clearly never dealt with this particular scenario in his 40 years of performing. Weddings looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and uncertainty. Aiden, he said gently, would you like to actually... Reverend Patterson, I interrupted. I'd like to say something to everyone if that's okay. He nodded, stepping back slightly. I turned to face the congregation, taking in all the faces. I recognized my family, friends, colleagues, and faculty members from Westmont University. I know you're all wondering what you just witnessed, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the chapel. Let me clarify something for you. What you saw wasn't a woman torn between love and duty. What you saw was someone revealing her true priorities. I could see people leaning forward, some still recording on their phones. In the back row, I noticed Dr. Morrison watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. 3 years ago, Professor Orion Beckett stole my research and destroyed my academic career. Today, my fiancé has chosen to prioritize his reputation over our marriage. I paused, letting that sink in. I want everyone here to remember this moment, because what happens next is going to be very interesting. David appeared at my side. Aiden, maybe we should know, I said firmly. I'm done being the victim in this story. I walked down from the altar and directly to where my parents were sitting. My mother was crying, and my father looked like he was ready to storm out and find Beckett himself. Mom, Dad, I said, taking their hands. I'm sorry you had to witness that. But I promise you, this isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. From there, I went to Dr. Morrison. She stood up as I approached, her face filled with sympathy. Aiden, she said softly, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that Thalia was involved with Professor Beckett. Neither did I replied. But Dr. Morrison, I need you to know something. Remember what you told me 3 years ago about my research having the potential to revolutionize education? She nodded. You were right. And now I'm going to prove it. I spent the next hour at the reception venue because canceling would have cost my parents thousands of dollars. They couldn't afford talking to every academic professional who had come to support me. Instead of wallowing in humiliation, I turned the gathering into an impromptu networking event. Dr. Sarah Chen from Pinnacle Educational Consulting was there, my boss, who would become a mentor and advocate. Aiden, she said, pulling me aside. I've been watching you handle this situation with incredible grace. That takes real character. Dr. Chen, I replied. I've been thinking. What if we fast-track my proposal for the Advanced Learning Institute? She raised an eyebrow. The one you've been developing for 2 years? Aiden, are you sure you want to make major career decisions right now? I've never been more sure of. Anything in my life. The Advanced Learning Institute was a project I had been working on during my time at Pinnacle. A proposal for a new type of educational research facility that would combine cutting-edge technology with innovative pedagogical approaches. It was ambitious, expensive. It's exactly the kind of forward-thinking initiative that could transform how universities approach digital learning. What kind of timeline are you thinking? Dr. Chen asked. 6 months to secure funding. Another. 6 to establish partnerships with major universities and full launch within 18 months. She stared at me. That's incredibly aggressive, I know. But I also know that Westmont University is about to face some very serious questions about their research integrity practices. Questions that are going to create opportunities for institutions that actually value innovation over politics. That evening, instead of being on my honeymoon, I was in my apartment with David and Dr. Chen, surrounded by laptops, research papers, and a flip chart covered in strategic planning notes. Okay, Dr. Chen said. Let's say we can get the funding, and that's a big if. What are you thinking for university partnerships? Thornfield University, I said immediately. Their new president, Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, has been pushing for. Exactly this kind of innovative approach. Plus, they've been looking for ways to distinguish themselves from more traditional institutions. David looked up from his laptop. Thornfield. That's Westmont's biggest rival. Exactly. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, then smiled slowly. You know what, Aiden? This might actually work. And the timing couldn't be better. There's going to be a major shakeup in higher education over the next few years, and institutions that get ahead of the curve are going to have enormous advantages. Over the next 3 weeks, while Thalia was presumably helping Beckett defend his stolen research, I was building something that would make both of them irrelevant. I reached out to Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne at Thornfield University, and to my surprise, she agreed to meet with me personally. Thornfield was a prestigious institution about 2 hours from Westmont. It's known for its progressive approach to education and its willingness to embrace new technologies. Mr. Sinclair, Dr. Hawthorne said, as we sat in her office overlooking Thornfield's beautiful campus, I've been following your work at Pinnacle, and I have to say, your proposals for integrating AI with personalized learning pathways are exactly the kind of innovation we're looking to support. Thank you, Dr. Hawthorne. I believe we're at a turning point in higher education. Institutions that fail to adapt are going to be left behind. I couldn't agree more. Tell me about this Advanced Learning Institute proposal. I spent the next 2 hours walking her through my vision, a research facility that would serve as a testing ground for new educational technologies, a training center for faculty from universities across the country, and a think tank for developing the next generation of learning methodologies. The key, I explained, is creating an environment where innovation is valued over politics, where the best ideas rise to the top regardless of who proposes them. Dr. Hawthorne's eyes lit up, and you're thinking Thornfield as the primary host. Institution? With the right partnership structure? Yes. But I also want to ensure that the Institute maintains independence from any single university's internal politics. Smart, she said. Very smart. What kind of funding are we talking about? Initial startup costs of $2.5 million, with an annual operating budget of $1.8 million. But I project the Institute becoming self-sustaining within 3 years through consulting contracts, corporate partnerships, and licensing agreements. And you think you can secure that level of funding? I smiled. Dr. Hawthorne, I've spent the last 3 years building relationships with educational technology companies, progressive donors, and forward-thinking administrators. They're all waiting for someone to create exactly what I'm proposing. By the end of our meeting, Dr. Hawthorne had agreed to present my proposal to Thornfield's Board of Trustees with her full endorsement. Wow. Mr. Sinclair, she said as we shook hands, I have a feeling this partnership is going to be the beginning of something extraordinary. As I drove back home that evening, I realized that getting left at the altar might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. Was focused on helping Beckett protect his stolen legacy. I was building something entirely new. But I wasn't done yet. The next phase of my plan would require patience, strategy, and a level of long-term thinking that most people in academia simply weren't capable of. I was going to do more than just succeed despite what Beckett and Thalia had done to me. I was going to make sure they both paid for it. 6 months after my abandoned wedding, the Advanced Learning Institute officially launched with a celebration at Thornfield University that made headlines in every major education publication. The guest list read like a who's who of progressive educators, technology innovators, and influential donors, everyone who mattered in the future of higher education. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne introduced me to the packed auditorium as the visionary leader who will transform how we think about learning in the 21st century. As I took the stage to deliver my keynote address, I noticed several familiar faces in the audience, colleagues from my graduate school days, faculty members from Westmont, and in the back row, trying to look inconspicuous, Dr. Helena Morrison. Free. Years ago, I began. I was forced to leave academic research because I chose integrity over politics. Today, I'm launching an institution where integrity isn't just valued, it's the foundation upon which everything else is built. The applause was thunderous. But what mattered more than the applause was the conversations that happened afterward. During the reception in Thornfield's Grand Hall, Aiden, Dr. Morrison, approached me during a quiet moment. I need to apologize. I should have fought harder. For you 3 years ago. Dr. Morrison, I replied, you did what you could within a broken system. That's exactly why the Institute exists, to create a better alternative. I've been following your work, she said. It's this AI-driven, personalized learning platform you've developed. .te. Revolutionary. It's everything your original dissertation was trying to achieve, but 10 times more sophisticated. That's what happens when you have the freedom to innovate without worrying about departmental politics. She smiled sadly. You know, there have been developments at Westmont, questions about research practices in the education department. I tried to sound casually interested. Someone has been systematically investigating Professor Beckett's publication history, going back years, comparing his work to graduate student research, looking for patterns. She paused. I don't suppose you know anything about that. I smiled. Dr. Morrison, I've been too busy building the future to worry about the past. What she didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was that I had indeed been conducting a very thorough, very careful investigation of Beckett's research practices, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. If the Institute was going to succeed, it needed to be absolutely bulletproof against any accusations of research misconduct. That meant understanding exactly how such misconduct operated and ensuring our systems could prevent it. In the process of developing those safeguards, I had uncovered a pattern of plagiarism that went far beyond what I had originally discovered. Beckett hadn't just stolen from me, he had been systematically incorporating graduate student work into his publications for over a decade. The evidence was overwhelming, meticulously documented, and had been quietly submitted to the appropriate academic integrity committees by anonymous concerned faculty members at several institutions. The dominoes were already falling, but Beckett didn't know it yet. "There's something else," Dr. Morrison continued. "Ms. Vance, Thalia, she's been asking about you." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest at hearing her name. "Has she?" "She seems to think that once Professor Beckett's tenure situation is resolved, you might be willing to reconcile." I laughed, surprising myself with how genuine it sounded. "Dr. Morrison, I'm engaged." Her eyes widened. I looked across the room to where Dr. Aubrey Barnes was speaking with a group of donors about the Institute's research into adaptive learning technologies. Aubrey was a brilliant cognitive scientist who had joined the Institute as our director of research 3 months earlier. Brilliant, and everything Thalia had pretended to be but never actually was. "Aubrey Barnes," I said, "our director of research. She proposed to me last week, actually." It was true. Aubrey had surprised me with a proposal that was characteristically direct and logical. "Aiden," she had said over dinner at our favorite restaurant, "we're perfect partners professionally, we're compatible personally, and we both want the same things from life. Why are we waiting?" She was right, of course. What we had was built on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine admiration for each other's work. It was everything my relationship with Thalia had pretended to be. "That's wonderful," Dr. Morrison said, though she looked slightly shocked. "She seems lovely." "She is. And unlike my previous fiancée, she's not in the habit of abandoning important commitments for the sake of men who don't deserve her loyalty." The news of my engagement spread through the academic community with surprising speed. Within a week, I was receiving congratulatory messages from colleagues across the country, many of whom made pointed comments about how much better Aubrey was for me than certain other people. But the most interesting response came from an unexpected source. Thalia called me directly, something she hadn't done since the wedding day disaster 6 months earlier.
"Aiden,"
she said when I answered, her voice tight with what sounded like barely controlled emotion. "I heard about your engagement." "Is it true?" "Hello, Thalia." "Yes, it's true, but how can you be engaged to someone else? We're supposed to be married. We had plans." I sat back in my office chair, looking out at the beautiful Thornfield campus where I now spent most of my time. "Thalia, you abandoned me at our wedding to help another man. Those plans ended that day. That was different. I was helping Orion with a crisis. It wasn't personal. It was absolutely personal. Speaking of Professor Beckett, how is his tenure? Situation working out?" There was a long pause. "That's complicated." "I imagine it is." What Thalia didn't know was that Beckett's tenure review had become the least of his problems. The research integrity investigations that had been quietly initiated at 3 different universities were starting to produce results. Those results were devastating to his reputation. "Aiden," Thalia continued, "I know I made a mistake. I know I hurt you. But what we had was real, and I think if we could just talk." "Thalia," I interrupted gently, "what we had was real. Past tense. But what I have with Aubrey is better. It's built on honesty, mutual respect, and shared goals. It's what I thought we had, but it turns out we never actually did." "That's not fair," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. "I loved you. I still love you. Maybe you did. But you love the idea of Professor Beckett more, and now you're dealing with the consequences of that choice." After I hung up, Aubrey knocked on my office door. "Everything okay?" she asked, settling into the chair across from my desk.
Oh.
You looked stressed during that call. Thalia, I said simply. Aubrey nodded understandingly. Still trying to convince you that abandoning your wedding was somehow justified? Something like that. You know, Aubrey said thoughtfully, I've been doing some research into emotional decision-making patterns, and I think her behavior is actually a perfect case study in cognitive dissonance. She can't accept that she made a selfish choice, so she's reframing it as noble sacrifice. This was one of the things I loved about Aubrey, her ability to analyze human behavior with the same precision she brought to educational research. It was like having a brilliant therapist and research partner rolled into one person. She continued, her Professor Beckett is about to discover that stolen research eventually catches up with you. You've heard something? Dr. Hawthorne mentioned that Westmont is facing some very serious questions about research integrity in their education department. Apparently, there's been a pattern of irregularities spanning more than a decade. I tried to look appropriately surprised. That's concerning. It is. But it's also an opportunity for institutions like Thornfield that actually value original research and ethical practices. She smiled. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about our wedding already. I just got engaged last week. I'm a planner, Aiden, and I think we should have the ceremony here at Thornfield, in the gardens behind the Institute. Small, intimate, focused on what actually matters, our partnership and our shared future. That sounds perfect, I said, and meant it. As Aubrey left to return to her research, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in less than a year. The Advanced Learning Institute was exceeding all projections. My engagement to Aubrey felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. And my research was finally receiving the recognition it deserved. But the most satisfying part was knowing that while I was building something new and meaningful, the people who had betrayed me were watching their carefully constructed lies fall apart. Beckett's research, integrity investigation was going to destroy his career, and Thalia was going to discover that hitching her wagon to a falling star had been the worst decision of her life. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's succeeding so thoroughly that your enemies become irrelevant. 2 years later, everything came full circle in the most unexpected way. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne announced her retirement, and the Thornfield University Board of Trustees offered me the position of Dean of Academic Innovation, essentially creating a new leadership, a role designed around my success with the Advanced Learning Institute. At 32, I became the youngest dean in Thornfield's history. My first official act was reviewing partnership agreements with other universities. My second was examining transfer applications from students seeking to join our innovative programs. That's when I discovered that both Thalia and Professor Beckett had applied to transfer to Thornfield. Beckett's application came first. His research integrity scandal at Westmont had finally caught up with him. 3 universities had found substantial evidence of plagiarism spanning over a decade. He was facing termination and desperately needed a fresh start. Thalia's application arrived. A week later, with Beckett's career in ruins, she was trying to distance herself from the association. Her graduate advisor at Westmont had mysteriously become unavailable to supervise her dissertation, leaving her academic future in limbo. Both applications landed on my desk for final approval. The irony was exquisite. The woman who had abandoned me for a man who had stolen. My research was now begging for admission to the institution I had built from nothing. I called them both in for interviews on the same day. Beckett arrived first, looking haggard and desperate. Dean Sinclair, he said, barely able to meet my eyes. I know we have history, but I hope you can evaluate my application based on its merits. Professor Beckett, I replied calmly, your application has been carefully reviewed. Unfortunately, Thornfield University maintains the highest standards of research integrity. Your recent difficulties at Westmont make you unsuitable for our community. His face crumpled. Please, I need this opportunity. My career is over without it. Your career ended the moment you decided to steal from your students. My decision is final. Thalia's interview was even more painful to watch. She walked into my office wearing a professional suit, her hair styled perfectly, looking every inch the successful graduate student she was pretending to be. "Aiden," she said, trying to smile, "congratulations on your appointment. You've accomplished so much." "Thank you, Ms. Vance. I understand you're seeking to transfer your graduate studies to Thornfield." "Yes, and I was hoping, given our history, that you might consider giving me a chance to explain." "There's nothing to explain," I interrupted. "You made your choice 2 years ago. You chose Professor Beckett over me, over your integrity, over your future. Now you're both paying the price." Her composure finally broke. "I made a mistake, Aiden. I was confused, and Orion manipulated me. I know that now." "Application denied," I said simply. As she left my office in tears, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Peace. 6 months later, Aubrey and I were married in the gardens behind the Advanced Learning Institute, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and the life we had built together. Dr. Morrison officiated the ceremony. She had left Westmont to join our faculty and had become ordained specifically for our wedding. "Do you, Aubrey, take Aiden to be your husband, to build a future based on shared dreams and mutual respect?" "I do," Aubrey said, her eyes sparkling with joy and certainty. "Do you, Aiden, take Aubrey to be your wife, to create something beautiful together that neither of you could achieve alone?" "I do," I replied, meaning every word. Our first dance was to a song we had chosen together, not because it was romantic, but because the lyrics spoke about building something new from the ruins of the past. A year later, Aubrey gave birth to our daughter Emma, holding her in the hospital room, looking at this perfect little person we had created together. I realized that getting left at the altar had been the best thing that ever happened to me. I heard through academic gossip that Thalia had eventually finished her dissertation at a small state school, settling for a mediocre career at a community college. Beckett had left academia entirely, last seen working as a corporate trainer for a mid-level consulting firm. Neither of them had achieved the greatness they had sacrificed everything to pursue. Meanwhile, the Advanced Learning Institute had become a model replicated by universities across the country. Our research was changing how students learned, and our ethical standards were setting new benchmarks for academic integrity. 5 years after my abandoned wedding, I was invited to give the keynote address at Westmont University's graduation ceremony. Standing at the podium where I had once been a struggling graduate student, looking out at hundreds of graduating students and their families, I spoke about resilience, integrity, and the power of choosing your own path. Sometimes, I concluded, the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that happens to you.
Ow!
Sometimes getting knocked down is just the universe's way of pointing you toward where you actually belong. In the audience, I spotted Dr. Morrison, now thriving at Thornfield, beaming with pride. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living so well that your past becomes irrelevant. Up next, we've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.